Your Excellency Ambassador Liu, it's an honor to have you here on this stage. You understand by the ovations and you know that Daniel Hagari is probably the most admired person in Israel these days, so we have a tough job after his Q&A, but I'm sure we'll make it. And in the next 15 minutes, we'll talk about politics, geopolitics, and economics. You served as Treasury Chief and Chief of Staff at the Obama administration, and before that at President Clinton administration, and also worked on Wall Street at some point. So we have all the issues covered. And first of all, I would like to ask you about American politics. We cannot ignore the attempted assassination on President Trump last Saturday. And how do you see its consequences on the presidential race? Is it, as they say in the media and social media, actually finished and Trump won?
Sophie, it's good to be with you, and I think any comment on what happened on Saturday night has to begin with how shocking and horrible an act of violence it was. It killed the father of a family who will pay that price forever, wounded a former president of the United States and the candidate for president of the United States. Fundamentally, what we have to take from Saturday night is that there is no place in American politics or in the politics of any democracy for violence. It has to end. I hope that the lesson taken from Saturday night is that it's a wake-up call to everyone, and I don't mean just in the United States, but to everyone, that rhetoric and language and action, sometimes, as people in this country know all too well, run into each other. So I think we have to take away from Saturday night the sense of horror and shock, gratitude that there wasn't more injury, and hopefully the statements made by President Biden, by former President Trump, set a tone for how it will be understood in the United States and around the world. We cannot tolerate politics expressing itself through violence.
Of course, but you think it will lessen the pressure inside of the Democratic Party on President Biden to resign from the presidential race?
I do not believe that Saturday night can affect the decisions that are made about how candidates run, except to take the kinds of lessons that I just described. The politics of America have to be ratcheted down. Politics in democracies around the world probably have to be ratcheted down. We have to take care of that in the United States, and that's what President Biden addressed last night.
Okay, so let's go to Israel, and we endure violence over the last 9 months, and our hostages as well. What is the current situation of the... Just a second. אפשר קצת בשקט שם מאחורה בבקשה? What is the current situation of the negotiations on the hostages release deal and the ceasefire? How the death, hopefully, of Mohammed Deif affects that?
The negotiations over a hostage release and a ceasefire remain at the very core of what we think has to be achieved. It's our highest priority. It's something we will continue to press forward on. We've had an important breakthrough in the negotiations. The framework that President Biden laid out at the end of May that reflected the offer of the government of Israel has now been generally accepted by all parties. There are difficult issues remaining. A framework has to be filled in. We knew there would be difficult issues. I think the process of working through those issues has to continue, and it's going to require some flexibility on all parts, as all negotiations do, as you've hammer out the details. To me, the urgency begins with the human lives that are at stake. There's not an infinite amount of time. Time is not a friend to the process, so we can't let up in any way. It's also strategically enormously important because if there's going to be a diplomatic breakthrough in the North, having there be a period of quiet related to a ceasefire and a hostage release is crucial. So it is of enormous importance. I can't sit here today and tell you that it's a day or two away. There are hard discussions. People have been shuttling between capitals for a reason. The conversation has to continue. And as I said, it's going to require some flexibility on all parts, while core principles have to be honored. I do not know how to judge the impact of the strike on Saturday. I can speculate one way or the other, but I'm not going to speculate.
Oh, please,
we're just going to press forward to keep everyone focused on the issues that have to be resolved, which are getting smaller, but they're still significant. The number of issues is reduced, but they are each crucial. Each issue is going to just have to be worked through, and that's what negotiations are doing now, and that's what has to be completed.
Is there an expectation at the White House that the issues will be resolved before Netanyahu comes to Washington next week?
I don't think there is an expectation of what date the issues will be resolved. We think today would be better than tomorrow. Tomorrow would be better than the day after. And if it's not before the trip, we continue after the trip. I think it's a mistake to think about a hard deadline because that's not how a negotiation like this works. There's a number of issues that have to be worked through, and they'll be worked through this week. They'll be worked through next week. And it couldn't happen too soon in terms of how important it is, but it also is not something that's tied to the date of one speech.
And the presidential race is not a deadline. Till what time we'll have the attention of the White House before it becomes all consumed with the American election?
You know, I've been chief of staff to a president during an election year, and you don't stop running the business of the country and the world during an election year. We will not lose our interest, ability, or attention, even as we get deeper into the political season. There's every ability to continue forward, and I hope we're not still at a place where we're asking when will there be a hostage deal and a ceasefire as we get into September, October, and November. You were asking me a few moments ago whether a week from Wednesday is a deadline. I don't want to think about what happens to the hostages if we're talking about this in November.
Yes, so really let's hope that will be resolved before that. And so, and the normalization with Saudi is still on the table also? It's not too late?
Normalization with Saudi Arabia is of enormous strategic importance. It's something that before October 7th was a priority. It was one of the reasons I accepted this post, because working towards a successful completion of that was at the highest level of importance in terms of regional security, U.S. security, and Israel's security. That didn't change after October 7th. If anything, it's even more clear how important it is. If we needed to be shown what the value of strategic cooperation is in the region, we saw it on April 14th, played out in real life, in real time. I think the path ahead is challenging. As I've said many times, it's going to require hard decisions. It's going to require some decisions about how to deal with the historical and ongoing challenge of Palestinian self-governance. It's not something that can be resolved if that issue is just pushed aside. On the other hand, as Secretary has said on so many, Secretary Blinken has said on so many occasions, it has to be resolved in a way that protects Israel's security, and that means in a way that doesn't have an armed state on the border that's a threat to Israel. So I think there is a way to get the negotiation with Saudi Arabia completed. Would it have been better if it could have been completed earlier? Of course. But that doesn't mean that the pathway doesn't remain open.
Okay, let's hope so, because it can also have many important economic implications, and I would like us, before we have to wrap it up, to touch a bit the economical issues. You used to be Treasury Chief, and it's not a secret that Israel faces also difficult economical issues. What would you advise to the Minister of Finance in Israel? What steps to take in order to control the damages to the economy?
You know, I've tried to come to understand the Israeli economy as best I can in the 8 months I've been here. It hasn't been a normal time. In my conversations with, chief executive officers of financial institutions, the governor of the Bank of Israel, my sense is that the Israeli economy has been very resilient and probably has responded better than might have been expected if you took out of the workforce so many people to serve in the military, if you had areas of the country that were not operating because people left their homes and their businesses, and yet the economy is not growing at 5%, but it's not in a recession and it's still growing. The projections I've seen are for continued growth next year, and if there isn't some further military conflict, the year after that, returning to a pretty healthy rate of growth. I think that our experience in the United States with challenges like this leads me to be concerned about the fiscal decisions that are made. Coming out of the Vietnam War, we watched our deficit grow, our ability to have a path forward without inflation became very difficult, and we ended up with stagflation. That doesn't mean that's what happens every time, but it's, we all are creatures of what we've learned, and for me that was early in my career that I saw that happen. So making the hard decisions to have your tax and budget policies reflect the reality of the additional burdens, which are probably going to be ongoing even after the war is over, is very important. And those are hard choices. We call it guns and butter in the United States, and then on the other side of it is revenues, which is really hard in every country. I've seen some steps taken that give me some encouragement in terms of a recognition that there need to be more revenues at a time like this. Frankly, I've seen some things that, just as a budget professional, have troubled me in terms of spending that wasn't critical being increased instead of held or decreased. Those are things that, apart from how good or bad the purposes are, it has a lot to do with shaping what the economy will be like 5, 10, and 15 years out. So those are hard decisions, but that's what I would take from the experience that I've had.
And the last question for the private sector, for the business sector, do you feel that the image of the Israeli business sector was badly influenced, and how can we restore and bring here more American investors back to Israel? Do you think they left?
So I must say I've been pretty struck that attitudes in the business and financial world towards doing business with Israel do not seem to have changed that much. Every time I meet with business people, either Americans or business people here, with finance professionals in government, out of government, I ask, are you seeing any signs of pulling away? And the answers that I've been getting are, business is pretty pragmatic. If you have the best technology and the best product and the ability to work together on the innovations of the future, that's not political. That's about doing business. Now, there is a question whether over the horizon there's a risk that that changes. But I think it's striking that it does not appear to have changed yet. And I think that is a very important ingredient, element of the resilience of the Israeli economy. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important that Israel remain connected to the world through the war and after the war, and why it does matter what the perception outside of Israel is, which means you have to engage and keep those ties very strong. One of the places where it begins is not in the business world, it's in the academic world. And one of the things that I think is important is we continue to have research and scholars, moving back and forth between our countries. So there's a lot of work to do, and there are risks, but I'm encouraged that so far we haven't seen that kind of pulling away.
Okay, let's hope for the best. Thank you very much for your insights, and hopefully next year of the service will be more relaxed. Thank you, Ambassador.
Good to be with you.